and welcome back to another video. In this video we're going to be comparing three different mouthpieces at three pretty drastically different price ranges. Just keeping in mind that I'm judging these based on my skill level as a trumpet player. Obviously I'm not a full professional trumpet player and I don't have the most ridiculous range because I'm not a lead player. So I'm going to judge them based off of my playing and just how I feel. Yeah, so I've had these mouthpieces for quite a long time, two of them at least. So we're at our lowest price range. We're starting off with a plastic 7C mouthpiece. This actually came with the mini trumpet that I got recently. I'm pretty sure this retails at a pretty low price, probably anywhere between $5 and $10, maybe a bit more if you get a slightly higher quality one, but it is a 7C, which means it has the same arrangement as most beginner trumpets. Usually they come in metal, obviously, but if you buy a beginner trumpet, usually it's going to come with a 7C. So we're starting off with that as our lowest price range. And then second of all, we have my normal mouthpiece that I play on basically in every single song, and that's a Bach 5B. Looks just like this. And I'll show you the insides of them and how they look just after this. And that retails for I think about $60 if you buy it new, $50 to $60. You can probably get it cheaper if you buy it used, although that applies to all of these, of course. Generally, this mouthpiece is just meant for normal range playing. It gives you a kind of wider, more open sound than a 7C, at least that's the idea, but it's not generally meant for range playing, although if you have the range, you can still play high notes on it. And then finally, at our highest price range, we have the Monette B7F, which looks just like this. It's obviously very pretty in gold, and this retails for about $250 from Monette. Very expensive. I used to use this when I played lead in jazz band in high school. I definitely don't use it quite as much anymore since I don't do a lot of lead playing and my range isn't that great as it is. But yeah, it's a very good mouthpiece, very expensive, so we're using this as our top of the range just to compare all these mouthpieces. Another thing with the Monette mouthpiece that you don't get with the other mouthpieces, obviously you're paying a lot of money. You get this really cool carrying case, just looks like this, got a little Monette on the front, and then it's got room for two mouthpieces. It just sticks in there like that, and then Velcro's closed, so just a little extra that I guess you get for the extra price. Obviously these are all different, good at slightly different things. Since the Monette is more of a lead mouthpiece, you would imagine that it's better at a higher range, but maybe not quite as good at lower ranges. So we'll just kind of compare those and see how it goes. I'm really curious to see how this turns out. We're going to do a couple of different tests on each of these. Starting with one, I'm just going to show you what they look like on the inside and just kind of give you an idea of what I can see looking at them now. And then we're going to do some lip dexterity tests, and then we're going to do a range builder just so we can kind of see how they work, and then you can obviously hear what they sound like. I'll use a more professional microphone to record the exercises, and then I'll also tell you what it feels like on my lips, because that's the most important part. You might not be able to hear as much of a sound, but I'll definitely be able to feel the difference. So let's just jump into it by showing you what these look like up close. All right, so first we have the plastic 7C mouthpiece. All right, so the first thing you can see on the 7C mouthpiece, the plastic one, is that it's got a really short headpiece, and that makes the stem look a lot longer. If you put it next to a normal mouthpiece or my 5B, you can see they're actually the same length, but the head cap is actually obviously a lot shorter, so that's going to change your tone for sure. Definitely probably make it sound more bright and pinched than the 5B. That's the idea of the 5B. With having a wider headpiece, you're going to get that more full tone. And then if we look on the inside here, so we also have a thinner rim. So generally a 7C is a bit thinner. This helps with range a little bit, certainly with beginner players, which is why it's such a good, let me try and get this to focus here. It's focusing on me. Which is why this is a very good mouthpiece for beginners, and it's sold mostly in beginner trumpets. So as you can see, there's the inside right there. If you look at that compared to the 5B, you can see that the rim is a little bit thinner. All right, so moving on up to our second price range, the Bach 5B. Obviously, I just showed it next to the plastic trumpet. You can see it's got kind of this wider head gap than the 7C. And then if we look on the inside, wider on the edge, but a basic general mouthpiece. Almost everybody should be able to play on this mouthpiece if they're used to a 7C without feeling too much of a difference. Certainly with some mouthpieces, they're shaped a lot differently, so you really got to get used to it. They've got really flat heads on the mouthpiece. This one does not, and neither does the 7C. It's pretty rounded right here. I don't know how well you can see that on the camera, but yeah, it's just rounded right over. It's not flat at all. All right, so finally, we have our Monette mouthpiece, which looks like this on the end. So I don't know how easy it is for you all to see the end cap on the camera, but it's actually very flat and almost curves in, where the 5B has a very curved edge over like this. The Monette is very flat on the end, so it does curve up, but if you press it against your lips, you can definitely feel that it's more flat than the 5B. And that's definitely going to cause a difference in tone. It's also something that you're going to have to adjust to as you play. Also, as you can see, the head cap is definitely differently shaped, which is going to give you a different sound than the 5B. Here we go, have them next to each other. Yeah, so as you can see, they're the same length overall, but the Monette has a much longer head cap right here. And if you look on the inside though, the inside actually is about the same depth. The Monette is a bit deeper from the looks of it. Yeah, a bit deeper and a bit more cone-shaped as opposed to the round 5B. I'm just trying to describe these well for you. So while you can see it goes all the way down here, the actual inside doesn't fit all that area. It's just extra brass, which is going to change your sound just a little bit. And yeah, this is built to help your range a little bit. At least that's my general understanding from it. My basic understanding of playing in the past is that it definitely gives you more of a lead player kind of sound, especially for jazz band, which is more harsh than the 5B. All right, so now you've seen those, let's jump right into the actual playing tests so you can hear what they sound like, and I can let you know the difference in the actual playing styles. When I'm playing them next to each other, I can let you know what the difference is. All right, so let's get started on the test. To start off, we're gonna work on a slurring exercise from Arbenz, which just works on slurring from low note, high note, low note, high note, low note, high note really fast. And we're just gonna do that on all three mouthpieces, and I'm gonna let you know kind of how it feels. I don't know if you'll be able to hear the difference too much, but I'll definitely let you know what it sounds like. We're gonna start off with the plastic 7C. So yeah, here we go. Alright, haven't done any of these in quite a while, so that was interesting. So next we're going to have the 5B. Here we go. Alright, a couple of mistakes on that one. Generally, I think it actually feels a bit better on the plastic mouthpiece going back and forth. I'm not sure why. I guess that's just the 7C. The smaller rims help that happen a little bit more. I definitely like the sound of the 5B a bit better, although it's probably not super noticeable to you guys, but yeah, tell me what you think about that. I would definitely say the 7C is actually a little bit easier to do these lip slurs than the 5B. So let's try out the Monette now. Alright, so as you can probably hear, the low notes definitely don't come out as well on this mouthpiece as they do on the others, and I'm sure that's because it's meant to be a range mouthpiece, so it's not meant for the lower range as much. I really have to push the air a lot more than on the others to make those low notes sound apparent. I'm not sure if that comes across on camera, but I can definitely feel it on here. I definitely have to try a lot more for those low notes. The actual lip slurring isn't actually any harder. It's probably about the same as the 5B, not quite as good as the 7C, but as I was saying, I really have to push the air more to make those low notes come out, and certainly with this kind of exercise, that's pretty hard to do. So with that being said, let's move on to the next exercise. Alright, so for this test, we're going to be doing some intervals, basically bouncing from low notes to middle notes all the way up to high notes. So this one should give us kind of an idea of how it works in that low register a lot better. I'm imagining that it's also going to work out better for the cheaper mouthpieces on this one, since the more expensive mouthpiece isn't meant for this, it's meant for high range. But we just kind of want to get a test and see how it does. So yeah, this is also from Arbenz. Yeah, and we're starting off with the low plastic mouthpiece. Here we go. Alright, my basic evaluation of that is that the low notes felt pretty easy, came out super easy on the 7C. Yeah, pretty easy to do the exercise. I didn't feel like I had to push too much extra on those low notes to get them out. They just came out pretty easily. So now let me know what you think. Let's move on to the 5B. All right, once again, just like the 7C, low notes came out pretty good. Once again, I'm going to just point out that I think the sound is definitely better on the 5B than the 7C. Maybe that's just because I'm biased because this is my favorite mouthpiece, but that would be my opinion. As far as playing these, I'd say it's about as easy as the 7C. The low notes come out pretty well on a 5B, and as they should. It's a pretty good mouthpiece for all ranges of the trumpet. Now let's get on to the Monette, which is probably going to come out the worst, which I know is not a good showing for the expensiveness, but when we get to the range building, we'll probably see the difference there. Alright, so as you could hear, just like in the last exercise, those low notes, those low Gs, did not come out quite as well as with the other mouthpieces. You definitely have to push a lot more air through this mouthpiece to get those notes to come out, as you can hear. So, yeah, as we expected, this mouthpiece, not that great for this kind of playing because those low notes are included in it. This is a range mouthpiece. So as expected, tone quality, definitely not as great on the lower register. I would definitely rank, out of all these three mouthpieces on this exercise, probably the 5B first, and then the 7C, and then the Monette. So let me know what you think in the comments below. And now let's go on to the final exercise, which is going to be the range exercise, which we hope the expensive mouthpiece is going to do the best on. Alright, so for this test, we're going to be doing a quick run through of a range building exercise that I discussed in a previous video on range building by Mark Zaus. It's just a very basic range building exercise that you can use to build your range. So it's going to give us kind of an idea of how these mouthpieces work for range. I want you all to keep in mind that my range is obviously not exceptional, so I'm not going to be able to get the full use out of these, especially the Monette mouthpiece, which somebody with a very high register can probably get a lot of use out of that I couldn't, since my range doesn't extend very far beyond a high D. But with that said, we're going to do this and see how it sounds. I know the Monette is also supposed to get more of a range sound out of a lead player, which is a bit more harsh, which you've probably heard in the past exercises. With that said, let's get on to it with starting off with the plastic 7C. Alright, now let's do it on a 5B. Okay, and now finally we're going to get onto the Monette mouthpiece, and then I'll discuss at the end how they all felt. Alright, so that's it for the range test. Definitely with this one, I can definitely feel the Monette. What you're paying for is kind of coming out. Now obviously I don't have the extended range, so as I stated before, I can't fully show what this mouthpiece is capable because I can't go that high, so we're just going up to the high C now. Though I could go a bit farther, it would just be kind of straining my range. And yeah, that would not really show off the mouthpieces all that well, so that's why I did it here. My rankings on this exercise is definitely the Monette's got to be first. It felt the easiest to hit those high notes for sure. It also has a much cleaner range, high range sound, which it should, as it's meant to be a lead mouthpiece. Second, we're going to have the 5B. That might be the fact that I'm just super comfortable with it. I've been playing with it for a long time, but it obviously didn't feel too hard or strained to get out that high C. And then finally, the 7C, which you'd think because it's a bit smaller rim, it would actually be easier to play high, but I actually don't find that. The 7C was actually a little bit strained to get out the high C, which usually that's a very easy note for me to come out with. Now this might be different for people who are more used to playing that mouthpiece, but for me, I would personally rank it last. Alright, so let's give a final overview of all three mouthpieces and what I think of them. So let's start off with the 7C, the plastic one. Honestly, I'm super surprised with how this plays for being obviously a very cheap mouthpiece. I also imagine these are super useful in marching band and things like that when you're playing outside, because as I've played pep band and things in the past, your metal mouthpieces get super cold. Plastic mouthpiece is not going to, which doesn't seem like a huge deal, but it could have some effect on you and definitely the comfort of playing. Furthermore, it actually plays pretty well. I don't think the sound is quite as good as my 5B. That might just be personal preference, but let me know in the comments if you had that same opinion. So yeah, sound quality not quite as good as the 5B, but it still comes out pretty good for being plastic and not metal. Also, in those first two exercises, it performed pretty well. It's really easy to play in that middle and low range of the trumpet, which is why it's really good for beginner players, as most beginner players don't have a very extended range beyond the staff, so it's great for that. However, when we got to the range part of the comparison, it didn't perform super well. Even with me not having a super extended range, it didn't really perform super well in that upper register. For me personally, please let me know what you think. I'm sure many of you out there play on a 7C. So my final verdict is that this is not a bad mouthpiece, especially for the price range of probably about $10. If you're buying in metal, it's probably a bit more expensive, but really not too much, since a 7C comes with almost every single trumpet. So really a great mouthpiece for a beginner. I would highly recommend it. If you're just starting off playing, go with the 7C. It's super cheap. It does just about everything you're going to need to do while you're a beginner trumpet player. Even a plastic one, honestly. Although if you're playing in normal band, maybe I would recommend a metal one instead, just because you get that more normal sound out of the trumpet. All right, moving on, we have obviously my personal favorite, because it's the one I play with every day. For $60, the Bach 5B I think is a pretty good deal, honestly. It's definitely a lot more expensive than the 7C, so for many beginners it might not be worth it. I personally moved on to the 5B when I got to high school, so 9th grade, which is when I definitely started to focus more on my playing and improving my playing. That's when I moved on to the 5B. On the first two challenges, it worked pretty darn well. I actually think the 7C beat it out a little bit on the first one, but on the second one they were pretty even, and I personally like the sound of the 5B a bit better, and that's just because of the widened head cap. It's got just kind of a fuller sound than the 7C. I don't really like the pinch sound. A lot of people probably feel the same as me, but as I said, let me know what you think of this one. So probably coming in first overall for me would be the 5B, because I think it performed well in all three challenges. In the range challenge, now this probably has a lot to do with the fact that I'm used to the mouthpiece, so I play with it all the time, but honestly pretty easy to get the high C out, which was our highest note, and it sounds good and full at the highest level, which is different from the 7C. The 7C sounded kind of not great once we got to that higher register. The 5B, however, sounded pretty good. So for your money, I think you're getting a lot. It's a really good all-around mouthpiece. Unless you're a lead player, this is probably a great mouthpiece for you. All right, so finally we have our Monette mouthpiece. So obviously $250 is a very high price to pay for a mouthpiece. Most people could not afford this, and I was very fortunate to get this when I was playing lead trumpet back in high school in jazz band, when I actually had a much better range and played lead all the time. Now obviously you can see through these challenges why this is a lead mouthpiece and it's not used for other things. I would highly not recommend playing on this mouthpiece if you're just a normal section player. If you have a range very similar to me that ranges from, I don't know, a low G or A or whatever and goes up to about a high C, I wouldn't recommend this. If you're not just playing lead trumpet all the time, be it in jazz band or normal band, this really isn't going to be the mouthpiece for you. However, it did perform the best by a long shot in my opinion in the upper register, and my experience in the past has shown that this has a much better lead tone than you're going to get from those other mouthpieces, and it does help me actually extend my range, usually at least a note up from where it usually is, at least being clear, which is something that you're not going to get out of these other mouthpieces. There's also obviously many other lead mouthpieces on the market that do very similar things, but as you can hear, this one does a really good job of helping with lead playing. However, when we were in those lower registers, it really did not do very well. Those low notes below the staff don't come out very clear. You really got to put a lot of air into them to get them out of this mouthpiece, but that's kind of as advertised. It's meant for lead playing. It's not meant for middle of the range. So if you're a lead player, you play lead in jazz, maybe this is a good mouthpiece for you. If you want to invest in a great mouthpiece for the future and you're committed to improving your playing, then I would recommend it for that. Yeah, with that said, I think that completes the comparison of our $10 versus $60 versus $250 mouthpieces. I hope this gave you a really good idea of kind of what these range mouthpieces sound like. There's obviously a ton of other mouthpieces on the market that maybe I'll check out at a further date. With that said, that's it. So if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like rating down below, and I will see you guys all next week.